So lastly, I think I want to echo what Henry said, that to a person, people asked that the sanctions be lifted, because those sanctions, while we were there, somebody came and said a certain pharmaceutical company, which name I forget at the moment, was refusing to send childhood immunizations from the United States to Syria, causing great harm to Syrian people. That's not how this country or any country should act within the world community. So the sanctions, as we've learned many times, do not hurt the governments they're intended to hurt. They hurt the people, and so they need to be lifted. We also heard that the border between Turkey and Syria needs to be closed so that this pipeline of trained groups, terror groups, is blocked and no more of those groups get into Syria. And finally, and this is where we come in as the United States, that the United States needs to stop supporting some of those outside terror groups. All the support for the outside terror groups needs to be withdrawn and allow the Syrians to fend for themselves. The Syrian Arab Army is fighting for its life and fighting for the life of Syria. And we need, as a country, to acknowledge our role, what we are doing to cause harm and destruction to the Syrian people, and we need to stop it, and we need to stop it now. And that's why one of the reasons, one of the things I'll be saying over and over again since my return from Syria. So that's me.
Thank you. Donna.
Did Bauman want to speak first?
Bauman, do you want to say something? No. Donna wants to.
Okay. My name is Donna Nassor. I have been a human rights and peace activist for as long as I can remember. I'm not going to tell you how many years, because then you'll know how old I am. I was honored to be asked to be part of this delegation, and I am grateful that I had the opportunity to go and see for myself, to sit face to face with the Syrian people, to share this time with this delegation so that we can all work together, coming back in cooperation to try to bring the message and the truth back to the United States. As an American citizen, it is shameful for me to admit what my government is doing in the sovereign country of Syria. We have no right to impose these illegal sanctions. In fact, these sanctions, allegedly, the government says are against the government of Syria. But in fact, it's against the people, civil society, people who are attempting to maintain the infrastructure, the health care, the safety of all Syrian people. One of the things that stood out to me is not only the lack of medication and the fact that Syrian children are dying because they can't get chemotherapy meds into the country because of the illegal sanctions that the U.S. and the West has imposed. Also, they're not allowing parts and material to get to businesses who are trying to maintain. And they're trying to maintain for more than one reason, and not just to continue to make money, but to employ people. Because when people have no way to earn a living, they become desperate. And we know that some of the Syrian people who may have chosen to join the terrorists, mostly for economic reasons, because they couldn't earn a living. And their benefactors, the U.S. and all the others who are collaborating together to fund this terrorism, are paying people very well to participate in this illegal activity against the Syrian people. So there are so many ways, subtle ways, that the U.S. sanctions are affecting the Syrians. And when we spoke to the business people, they mentioned to us, we're desperately trying to stay in business. We're desperately trying to keep our people employed so they don't become desperate and they don't then feel like they have no other choice. Something else that's very important is we did have the opportunity to speak with civil society, not just all of the official organizations. And we met with people who have witnessed and lived through and shared their experiences with the mercenaries. And explained unspeakable things, and I'm not going to go into detail about what those were, but it was very difficult to sit in the presence of someone whose child was assassinated, whose niece was kidnapped and is still missing, whose daughter was raped, kidnapped, raped, and then sent back, male and female rapes we heard about. This is what the U.S. is financing. This is what the U.S. is backing. And this is not okay. And as an American citizen, beyond being a peace and human rights activist, I will not be silent about what I learned. And we have to take responsibility for what's happening in this country and the lack of morality when it comes to our foreign policy and what we are doing elsewhere. I do want to say that, we did have almost a 2-hour meeting with President Assad, which we were all very grateful for. After listening to him, after listening to all the voices of civil society and the groups and the government officials that we met with, if you think about it, it makes no sense what the U.S. media and Western media is reporting. It makes no sense that Assad, who is trying to maintain the infrastructure and look toward the future for the Syrian people, would be the one destroying hospitals and all of these places that the U.S. media and the Western media are claiming that he is the one responsible for destroying. It just doesn't make sense. He is interested in the future for Syria. He told us flat out, when this is over with, we can have another election. If they don't want me, they don't want me. That's fine. But for now, I've been elected to lead this country, and that is what I will do. The last piece that I want to talk about is, having been a student and scholar of restorative and transitional justice for many years, I was really very, very impressed and excited about the fact that they have a ministry of reconciliation, that even in the middle of the trauma that the Syrian people are involved in at this point, they are looking towards the future and they're dealing with people in a restorative and healing way already. So if someone has joined if some Syrian citizen has joined the mercenaries, they're literally going, and if they put down their arms, they are welcomed back into Syrian society. And they're fed, and their families are fed, and restorative justice techniques are being used so that you don't have a group of Syrians now who are feeling outside of society. So everything that I've said, I will continue to say, and I will continue to share with other people. And I feel now that since we have been there, we are now capable of sharing truth that, unfortunately, our media has not been offering the world. And we intend to not be silent from here forward. And thank you all for listening.
Joe.
My name is Joe Jameson. I'm coordinator of the Queen's Peace Council, which is an affiliate of or branch of the U.S. Peace Council. And my background is the trade union movement. So I'm accustomed to speaking bluntly. So forgive me if I do that. I'm reminded of I associate myself with all the comments of my colleagues here, but I'm reminded of the famous comment by the American writer Mark Twain, who once said that it's not what we don't know that gets us into trouble. What gets us into trouble is what we think we know for sure that just ain't so. And that's what I think of when I think about my fellow Americans and what they know about Syria and what they think they know about the war and the Syrian government and the Syrian leadership. What they think they know, I'll argue, just ain't so. And so we have to take that on because we're getting into trouble. Our delegation came to Syria with political views and assumptions, but we were determined to be skeptics and to doubt everything, to meet everyone we could, and to confirm or disconfirm received opinion and establish and conventional wisdom, and to follow the facts wherever they led us. I concluded a number of things from the trip. I won't go over things that my colleagues have already mentioned. The motive, in my opinion, of the U.S. war is to destroy an independent Arab secular state. It wants it's the last secular Arab state standing, and it wants a client regime, like Libya, like Iraq, like a number of other countries you could mention. The U.S. hostility to independent Syria long precedes 2011, the beginning of the war. The U.S., I concluded, claims to be against ISIS terrorism, but yet it's been loath to fight a really consistent fight against terrorism. Certain privileged groups, such as the al-Nusra Front, the names shift, are called moderate rebels because they fight the Syrian government, and the U.S. wants that. They are not moderate. They beheaded a 12-year-old boy when we were there. We saw it on YouTube and on TV. The motives of the U.S. proxy war states are somewhat different. Sectarian motives and regional power rivalries affect Saudi Arabia and Qatar. The Wahhabist ideology, the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, is a sick, medieval, backward ideology. It drives the Saudi state. It motivates that state to finance this war. And Damascus, by contrast, promotes a socially inclusive and pluralistic form of Islam. And we met the leaders of that form of Islam, and they are humane and democratic-minded people and have every reason to join with the American people in stopping this insane support for Wahhabism, which is behind so much terrorism in the world. Those of my fellow countrymen who are dogmatic about Assad demonization are not going to like what I have to say now, which is that the Syrian government is popular, and for that reason, it is winning the war. The Battle of Aleppo will probably be decided soon, relatively soon, and maybe the last hurrah, in my opinion, of the foreign mercenaries. The president is popular. His government is recognized as legitimate by the UN. It contests and wins elections. The elections are monitored. There's a parliament which contains opposition parties. We met them. There is a significant nonviolent opposition which is trying to work constructively for its own social vision. Some of it is inside the government, which in effect is a government of national unity. Some of it is in the parliament. We met them. The Minister of Reconciliation, as I think some of us have said, deals directly with armed groups, and he's an opposition leader. So let me conclude, which is that the U.S. policy on Syria, regime change, is not wrong in its details. It is wrong in its fundamentals. It is wrong root and branch. It violates the UN Charter. It violates international law. The U.S. is bombing parts of Syria without the consent of a legitimate government. That violates international law. The sanctions violate international law. I won't dwell on it because Marilyn and Donna have already discussed that. I think out of our trip flow certain tasks. I think it is the task of the U.S. anti-war movement to unite around a different vision than what it has united around thus far. Thus far, it has united around a feeble vision that is partly false, that partly accepts the dominant State Department corporate media narrative. We must directly and forthrightly challenge U.S. policy if we are to shift U.S. public opinion. Some organizations, alas, buy into the dominant mainstream media narrative. They have not covered themselves in glory by so doing. This is a dangerous moment. Without mentioning names, one of the leading, apparently the leading candidate for president is surrounded by military advisors who are talking about no-fly zones, which means air war against the Syrian Air Force and the Russians, or boots on the ground, which means U.S. invasion. If we're not frightened by that talk, we should be frightened by that talk. This is a dangerous moment. We have to change the basic U.S. policy. We need to have a different kind of anti-war movement, and we must begin to shift U.S. public opinion. Thank you.